When I pulled out Sugoro Quest, I got a sense of dread. I already knew it was an RPG board game hybrid. The subtitle, Dice no Senshitachi, or The Quest of the Dice Heroes, kind of gave that away. But I realized that the title was a reference to Sugoroku, a Japanese board game that has been one of the things I have enjoyed the least in Famidaily. Sugoroku is a basic roll-and-move game where players roll the dice, land on a square, and have a random event happen to them. And that's really it. There's a surprising number of Famicom games built around this premise. The good news is that Sugoro Quest is not really Sugoroku-based. While there are a few random events that can occur when you stop in a town or meet someone on the path, it's really more of a stripped-down RPG. And unfortunately, they stripped out all of the things that people like in RPGs to just leave the endless grind. There isn't even really a plot to speak of. There's just a kingdom that adventurers happen to like, and then 4 adventurers show up. There are 6 separate quests for you to take part in, each of which involves crossing a map and then defeating the monster at the end. You always start out at the castle town. Here you can meet the king and get some information, buy items and equipment, save the game, and check out the status of your heroes. The town doesn't change as you progress through the game. It's just always here and where you start at. Once you feel you're ready, you can choose to take on a quest. Although you can pick from any of the quests, you have to clear them in consecutive order. It won't let you do Quest 3 until you complete Quest 2. And even before you set out, you have to choose which of the 4 heroes you're playing as. There are 4 different dice heroes here, and naturally they all have different abilities and equipment that they can use. Your options are the fighter, who's physically strong and can cast some magic, but isn't very good at it. The dwarf is the strongest of the 4 heroes, but can't cast magic at all. And naturally his counterpart is the elf, who has powerful magic, and is very weak physically. And finally you have the half-elf, who gains magic to manipulate dice rolls in combat. Once you're out on the board game, every turn you get to roll a die and move that many spaces, and naturally what space you land on determines what happens. A blank space means you get into combat, and we'll get to that in a little bit. You have to stop at towns and castles rather than passing them, and there you can get some information, and in towns you might have a random event. The pools will restore your health and magic, and there is no maximum to those. So, for example, if you happen to keep landing on pools over and over again, you could quickly boost your health to several hundred. Or if you just happen to miss all of them, you could wind up in some pretty deep trouble. The sword, armor, and shield spaces will have you meet a goddess who enhances your items. And again, there's no upper boundary on this. Though, just based on luck, you're probably going to be better off buying upgrades. Both the R and the N squares end your current quest, though R means you're returning in failure. And the arrow spaces prevent you from going certain directions. On this first quest, you have to get to this boss lair and then lose to them if you want to follow that outside path. As you might expect, combat is resolved with dice. When you're fighting an enemy, you're given the choice to attack, cast a spell, use an item, run away, or summon. Summoning allows you to bring out a dice man. You roll a die, and a little orange guy appears based on how well you roll. These dice men stand in for you during the battle, and they have special abilities like being able to throw their die at somebody to stun them, or re-rolling a die if they're unhappy with the result. But the special abilities don't work all the time, and for some of the dice men, they don't really work in your favor. At early levels at least, you can get by just fine without summoning them, so I actually think it's a little bit better to go without it first. When you attack, both sides roll their die, and the numbers that can come up depend on your attack strength. Whoever has the higher number does damage to the other person, and the damage scales with the difference between the 2 numbers. In the rare event of a tie, and I do mean rare, I saw it happen exactly once during my hour of play, the dice stay out and a new die is rolled. When someone finally beats the other die, then it's a critical hit, as all of the dice resolve as attacks that were not defended against. Magic works the exact same way as attacking, even when it's magic that you're casting on yourself. so you have to outroll the enemy if you're using your heal. Using an item doesn't use up your turn, so you can consume healing items or use things to affect the battle without taking an attack in return. Running away is way more powerful than you might think. If you choose to run away, then you roll a die and move that many squares on the board backward. Then the monster rolls a die to see if they catch up with you. What this means is that you could get into a fight with a monster and then run away so that you could backtrack over squares that you want to try to land on. In the right areas, this can be very useful. If you complete a quest, well then you probably have to do it again. You just don't earn enough money and experience doing Quest 1 to survive Quest 2. So you will want to repeat the same quest over and over again, and have all 4 of the characters do the same quest over and over again, until you're strong enough to move on to the next board. You are going to want to level up multiple characters, because in the final quest, the characters that you use can get captured, and then have to get rescued by another character that you've already built up. In Japan, Sugoro Quest seems to be fondly remembered. Not a monster hit, of course, nothing is on the Famicom at this point, but I found a fair number of people mentioning that they liked it. There was definitely more talk about this game than what I usually find for games these days. Personally, I think Sugoro Quest is a bit disappointing. There's several things in it that I think are actually pretty good ideas, like the way that you can use retreating to maneuver around the board. What my problems come down to is that there's not much to explore on the boards. Even on the later quests, the path is pretty linear, only forking at some spots to wind up at the same destination 10 squares later. And then you have that grind. All of the characters share a common pool of gold, so that can help some of the weaker starting characters get over the initial hump. But that just means that the characters who gave their gold away need to get more. You're going to be spinning your wheels on some very dull actions for a while. Now all that said, there is a sequel to Sugoro Quest on the Super Famicom, and I think I'm probably going to pick it up at some point. I get the impression that they learned their lesson here, and gave players meaningful decisions to make in that one. In terms of Famicom board games, Sugoro Quest is in the upper tier, but it's let down by its RPG stylings falling flat.